The wind howled over the endless desert, carrying dust across the dry horizon. The sun hung low, blazing gold against the sand. Miles away from the nearest outpost, a man named Ethan Cross drove his battered rover through the dunes, his eyes narrowed behind tinted goggles. He wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody came this far anymore, not after Crash. 3 days earlier, a strange light had fallen from the sky. The locals called another scrap fire, but Ethan had seen it differently. The angle of descent, the burning blue tail, the quiet pulse in the night sky before it vanished. It wasn't a meteor. It was a ship. His rover's engine coughed as he slowed near a twisted pile of metal. The air shimmered with heat. Shattered glass and glowing fragments covered the sand. Ethan climbed out, boots sinking into the hot surface. The smell of burned metal and something else, something alive, filled the air. "Hello," he called, his voice echoing faintly. "Anyone alive?" No answer, only wind. Then a sound, soft, broken breathing. He followed it around a half-buried panel of alloy and stopped cold. There, lying face down in the sand, was a small figure. At first, he thought it was a child, but as he turned her over, the truth stole his breath. Her skin was pale lavender, shimmering faintly in the sun. Her hair was silver white, almost glowing. Her features were delicate, almost too perfect, and when her eyelids fluttered open, her eyes were bright violet, deep and frightened. She wasn't human. "Hey, hey!" Ethan whispered, kneeling beside her. "You're okay, you're safe." She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out, words he couldn't understand. Ethan saw the cuts on her arms, the faint burn marks across her back. She was shaking, weak from dehydration. He lifted his canteen and tilted it to her lips. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "All right," he said softly. "Let's get you out of here." He wrapped her in his jacket and carried her to the rover. She was light, fragile, like holding smoke. As he drove back across the dunes, she stared silently through the window, clutching his sleeve. By the time they reached his small desert home, the sky had turned orange with sunset. Ethan lived alone, a mechanic who once worked for the colonial fleet before he quit. His cabin was built from old ship parts, surrounded by wind turbines and dust. He laid her on his bed and gave her water, then food. She ate slowly, carefully, watching every move he made. He could tell she didn't trust him yet, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Later, when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, melodic, and trembling. "Cullen," she said, touching her chest. "Cullen." "Cullen," he repeated, pointing at her. "That's your name?" She nodded weakly. "All right, Cullen," he said, smiling. "I'm Ethan." Over the next 2 days, Cullen began to recover. She explored the cabin quietly, touching every small tool and object with wide curiosity. She was smart. She learned simple words fast. Water. Food. Safe. Ethan. But sometimes, Ethan noticed her gaze turn distant. She would look at the horizon, her violet eyes full of sadness, as if searching for something lost. One night, she woke screaming. Ethan rushed to her side. She spoke rapidly in her language, shaking, terrified. He couldn't understand, but he held her hands and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." When she finally calmed, she looked at him, really looked, and whispered one word in broken English. "Chased." Ethan frowned. "Someone's chasing you?" She nodded slowly. Then she whispered another word, one that made his stomach drop. "Hunters." He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the desert was quiet again. Cullen sat outside, watching the sunrise. Her silver hair glowed in the light, and Ethan felt a strange pull, not just because she was different, but because she was alive when she shouldn't be. He thought about taking her to the authorities, but something told him not to. The way she flinched at the sound of aircraft, the way she whispered, "Hide," whenever she heard engines. It was clear she didn't trust humans. And honestly, Ethan didn't trust the government either. On the 3rd day, he decided to move her somewhere safer, maybe to the mountains. He packed supplies, checked the rover, and stepped outside to call her in. But she wasn't there. The chair was empty. The wind blew softly through the open door. "Cullen," he called. No answer. He walked around the house, scanning the sand. Then he froze. Footprints. Not hers. They were larger. Dozens of them, circling the cabin. The tracks led toward the east, into the dunes. And on the horizon, shimmering through the heat, he saw them. Figures. Tall, graceful silhouettes moving through the sunlight. A group of women, their silver hair gleaming like flame, their armor reflecting the day. Cullen's people. Ethan's pulse quickened. He didn't know if they came for her or for him. As the wind carried the sound of their footsteps closer, Cullen appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with tears. She whispered something in her native tongue, a single word that sounded like both fear and hope. Then the first of the alien women stepped forward. Her gaze locked on Ethan, and for a moment, the world stood still. The golden sun burned high above the desert as Ethan stood frozen outside his cabin. The women from the horizon were now close enough for him to see their faces. Tall, elegant, and otherworldly. Their skin shimmered faintly under the light, a soft lilac glow beneath the sand-colored armor that hugged their graceful forms. Each carried a long, curved weapon that glinted like glass. Cullen stood beside him, trembling. Her wide violet eyes were filled with something he couldn't read. Fear, guilt, and longing. The tallest woman stepped forward. She was older than Cullen, but still young-looking. Her eyes bright silver, and her hair woven into shining braids. Her armor bore a glowing symbol across her chest, a crest of leadership. When she spoke, her voice was calm but powerful, echoing slightly in the still air. "Cullen Ritinora." Cullen gasped, whispering something in reply. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he knew their meaning. These women were not strangers. They were her people. The leader's eyes turned toward him. Her gaze was sharp and unreadable. "You," she said, her accent thick but understandable. "You found her." Ethan hesitated, his hands half raised. "Yeah, she crashed here. I helped her." The leader looked back at Cullen, who clutched Ethan's arm tightly, shaking her head. She said something quick and desperate in her language. The others murmured, some exchanging looks of shock. Ethan frowned. "What's going on?" The leader's expression softened slightly, though her voice remained firm. "You should not have kept her. It is forbidden for humans to take one of our kind." "I didn't take her," Ethan said, frustration in his tone. "I saved her. She would have died out there." The woman studied him for a long moment, as if searching his soul. Finally, she nodded once. "You speak truth," she said, "but you do not understand what you have done." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Then tell me, what's happening?" The leader turned to Cullen and spoke again in their language, her voice quieter this time. Cullen's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head and pressed closer to Ethan, whispering, "No, no go." Ethan knelt beside her, trying to calm her trembling hands. "Hey, it's all right. They're your people, right? You're safe now." But she only cried harder. "No safe. They kill me." Ethan froze. The words hit like a hammer. "What do you mean? They're your people." The leader heard her and frowned deeply. "She speaks half-truths. Cullen has broken sacred law. She left the Enclave without command. She carried human tech. She crashed." Ethan interrupted. "You're saying you'd kill her for that?" The leader's expression didn't change. "Our laws keep us hidden. Humans bring death. If one of us reveals our existence, all suffer." Ethan stood, anger burning in his chest. "So you'd rather kill your own than forgive her for surviving?" Several of the alien women stepped forward, weapons half raised. Cullen shouted something, a plea. It sounded like, and they froze, lowering their blades again. The leader sighed softly, her voice low. "You speak with courage, human, but you cannot understand. This child carries something that belongs to us, something dangerous." Cullen flinched. Ethan turned to her. "What are they talking about? What do you have?" Her eyes filled with guilt. She reached into her clothing and pulled out a small, glowing crystal. It pulsed faintly with blue light, humming softly like a heartbeat. Ethan stared. "What is that?" The leader stepped closer, her gaze locked on the crystal. It is our life core, a shard of our ship's heart. It powers our sanctum. Without it, our people weaken. So she took it? Ethan asked, confused. She saved it, the leader said quietly. But she was not meant to leave with it. Now she is both thief and protector. Kalen looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm not thief," she whispered. "They want to destroy humans. I stop. I run." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Wait, destroy humans?" The leader's jaw tightened. "You should not have heard that." The air grew tense. The women behind her shifted, their weapons humming faintly. Kalen stepped in front of Ethan, spreading her small arms. "No hurt. No hurt him." Something in that moment stopped everyone. The desert wind slowed. The leader looked at the trembling girl, then at the man behind her. Finally, she spoke in a softer voice. "Kalen, you defend this man?" Kalen nodded, crying, "He saved me. He kind. He give food. He no hurt." The leader turned to Ethan again. Her expression was unreadable, but something, maybe respect, maybe sorrow, flickered in her eyes. "You have shown mercy," she said. "Few of your kind would. That mercy will not be forgotten." She motioned for the others to lower their weapons. The tribe obeyed. Ethan exhaled slowly. "So what now?" The leader paused before answering. "Now, we decide if Kalen's act was a sin or a sign." Then she turned and walked toward the horizon, motioning for them to follow. Ethan looked at Kalen, who was still trembling. "Do you trust her?" he asked quietly. Kalen hesitated, then nodded once. "She mother." Ethan's eyes widened. "Your mother?" Kalen nodded again, looking toward the tall woman who now stood silhouetted by the blazing sun. And suddenly, the whole picture began to change. Ethan followed the group through the endless dunes, the harsh desert wind biting at his face. Kalen held his hand tightly as they walked, her small steps barely keeping up. The sun blazed high above, turning the sand into rivers of gold. The alien women moved with grace, silent and focused. They didn't seem to tire. Their shimmering armor reflected the sunlight, making them look almost angelic, or like warriors from a dream. Ethan had seen many strange things in his life, but this was different. These women looked powerful, ancient, and dangerous. The leader, Kalen's mother, walked in front. Her name, Ethan learned from Kalen, was Saris. She didn't speak to him much, only glancing back every now and then to make sure he was keeping up. There was no warmth in her eyes, only calm strength and sorrow. After hours of walking, the group reached a deep canyon. From above, it looked like nothing but shadow. But as they descended, the air grew cooler, and Ethan began to see faint blue lights glowing from the walls, markings like symbols carved into the rock. They pulsed softly, alive with energy. Saris raised her hand. The symbols brightened, revealing a massive stone door hidden in the canyon wall. Ethan watched in awe as the rock split open soundlessly, revealing a vast underground city. The light inside was warm and soft, glowing from crystals embedded in the ceiling. Strange plants grew along the walls, their leaves silver and luminescent. Water flowed through narrow channels in the stone floor. It was peaceful, almost holy. Kalen gasped with wonder. "Home," she whispered. Ethan couldn't speak. The city looked alive, a blend of technology and nature unlike anything he'd seen. Yet the air carried a heaviness, as if the place was both beautiful and broken. Saris turned to him. "You stand in the sanctuary of Ari, then," she said. "The last refuge of our kind." Ethan looked around. "It's incredible," he said honestly. "But why hide here?" Saris's expression darkened. "Because your world hunted us once. Because your kind wanted our power." Ethan frowned. "That's not true. I mean, I've never heard of your people." "You wouldn't have," Saris replied. "Your leaders erased all record of us long ago." Kalen looked between them nervously. She tugged on Ethan's sleeve and whispered, "Mother angry but not bad." Ethan gave her a small smile. "I'll remember that." They entered a tall hall filled with softly glowing pillars. At the center stood a circular platform surrounded by alien symbols. Several other women were waiting, older ones with stern faces and long robes. They looked at Kalan with both sadness and disapproval. One of them spoke first. "The child returns with a human. The exile is complete." Sarah stepped forward. "She returns because she carries a heart crystal. Without it, the sanctum will fade." The council members murmured. One of them glared at Kalan. "She stole it. The law demands judgment." Kalan hid behind Ethan, gripping his leg. Her small voice trembled. "I know steal. I save it. It break. I fix." Ethan stepped forward. "She's telling the truth. When I found her, she was barely alive, clutching that thing like her life depended on it." The room fell silent. The elders studied him carefully, the first human to stand before them in centuries. One of them spoke again. "You risked your life for her?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, she needed help. I didn't even know what she was. I just knew she was scared." A faint whisper ran through the crowd. Saris watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. The eldest of the women finally spoke. Perhaps the child's act was not rebellion, but instinct. Perhaps the stars guided her to him. Saris frowned. "You speak a prophecy." The elder nodded. "The old texts say, when a hard two worlds beats as one, the path of unity will open. Maybe this human is part of that path." Ethan blinked. "I don't know about any prophecy. I just did what anyone should have done." The elder smiled softly. "That human is exactly why it might be true." Kalan looked up at him, eyes wide. "Prophecy mean good?" He chuckled. "Let's hope so." But not everyone was convinced. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, anger flashing her eyes. "We cannot trust him. Humans brought ruin before. What if he brings it again?" Ethan raised his hands. "I don't want trouble. I just want her safe." Saris looked between him and her people. For the first time, her voice wavered slightly. "He speaks with truth," she said. "Kalan lives because of him. Whatever fate has tied them together, we will not break it yet." The warrior lowered her eyes reluctantly. Saris turned to Ethan. "You may stay in the sanctuary for now. But understand, every step you take here is watched. If you harm her or our people, your life will end before your next breath." Ethan nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Kalan smiled and squeezed his hand. "You stay. We safe now." Ethan smiled back, though uneasily. He knew safety was never that simple. That night, as he lay in a small chamber made of smooth stone, he couldn't sleep. The soft blue glow of the crystals filled the room. He could hear distant whispers, strange and rhythmic, like a prayer. Kalan slept beside him, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. Ethan looked up at the ceiling, his mind racing. He had come to this world to escape his past, to live quietly and forget, but now he was part of something ancient, something hidden, something that could change both their worlds. And deep down, he could feel it. This was only the beginning. Morning came softly to the sanctuary. The glowing crystals along the stone walls dimmed as the natural light from the canyon filtered down. The air smelled faintly of water and strange flowers that glimmered under the faint sunbeams. Ethan awoke to find Kalan sitting beside him, humming quietly. She was tracing shapes on the stone floor, the same glowing symbols that covered the city walls. "What are you drawing?" Ethan asked, stretching. Kalan smiled shyly. "Song marks. They tell stories." He leaned closer. "Stories? About what?" She pointed to one of the symbols, a swirl with 3 dots at its center. "Old time, when humans and my people friends." Ethan blinked. "Wait, humans and your people were friends?" She nodded, but her expression darkened. "Long ago, before war." Before Ethan could ask more, a soft voice came from the doorway. "She speaks truth." It was Saris, Kalan's mother. She stood tall and graceful in the morning light, her silver hair glowing like fire. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried years of sorrow. Ethan stood. "You were allies once." Saris nodded slowly. "Before the great betrayal. Before greed turned trust into ruin." Ethan frowned. "What happened?" Saris motioned for him to follow. Kalan stood too, curious. They walked through winding tunnels until they reached a large open hall, the Chamber of Memory. The walls were covered in carvings, ancient scenes glowing faintly. Saris raised her hand, and one section of the wall came to life, projecting a shimmering image, a vision of stars and ships. Ethan saw humans and aliens together, working side by side, building something massive in orbit above a blue planet. "This was our alliance," Sarah said quietly. "Humans and Ari then, builders of light. Together, we created energy from the stars. We shared knowledge, we shared peace." Ethan watched, fascinated. "So what changed?" The image shifted. Now the ships fired weapons. Explosions ripped through the sky. Cities burned. Humans wanted to control the energy alone, Saris continued. They feared our power. So they betrayed us. They destroyed our star stations and erased our history. Ethan's chest tightened. That can't be all humans. Maybe. Saris turned to him, her eyes sharp. It was enough. We lost millions. We hid beneath your deserts, swearing never to be seen again. Ethan looked down. And Kalen, she's the first to break that rule. Saris nodded. She is my daughter, stubborn and pure of heart. She believed peace was still possible, that your kind had changed. Kalen looked at her mother, her voice trembling. I still believe. Saris's expression softened. And yet, your belief nearly killed you. They stood in silence for a while. Then Ethan asked, So what now? Are you going to stay hidden forever? Saris's gaze drifted to the glowing crystal collar still wore around her neck. We would have. But the heart crystal she carries is dying. It powers our sanctuary. It is the last spark of our world's core. When it fades, this place will fall. Ethan frowned. Can't you repair it? Saris hesitated. We can, but it requires the same energy humans once used to destroy us. Only a fusion core from your ships can recharge it. Ethan's stomach dropped. You're saying you need something from the surface, from a human facility? Yes, Sarah said simply. And if we go there, your people will discover us. That cannot happen. Kalen looked between them nervously. Then what do? Ethan thought for a long moment. Finally, he said, Let me do it. Saris frowned. I know how to move through human zones, he said. I worked for Fleet before I left. I can get a small fusion cell. Nobody has to know you exist. Saris studied him carefully. You would risk your life for us? For her. Ethan looked at Kalen, who smiled faintly, her violet eyes hopeful. Yeah, he said softly. I guess I would. There was a long pause. Then Saris nodded. So be it. You will go with Kalen. She can guide you through the old tunnels. But understand this. If you fail, both worlds may suffer. Ethan nodded firmly. Understood. As Saris turned to leave, she spoke one more thing, her tone lower, almost like a whisper. Be careful whom you trust. There are those among us who believe the child should have died with the ship. They will not want her to return. Ethan stiffened. You mean someone here wants to kill her? Saris didn't answer. She walked away, her silver cloak flowing like mist. Ethan looked down at Kalen, who was staring at the glowing crystal on her chest. Is it true? He asked quietly. Someone here wants to hurt you? Kalen nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. Mother protect me, but others hate. They say I curse. Ethan knelt beside her. Hey, you're not a curse, Kalen. You're the reason this place still has hope. She smiled weakly and placed her small hand over his. We go together? Always, he said. That night, as they prepared to leave the sanctuary through an ancient tunnel, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching them. Eyes filled not with kindness, but with quiet hatred. And far in the shadows above, a figure stood on a high ledge, one of the alien warriors, silently following them with cold, glowing eyes. The tunnel opened to a blinding light. Ethan squinted as the first rays of the sun hit his face. After days underground, the warmth felt strange, almost sharp. Kalen stepped beside him, blinking rapidly. Her pale violet skin shimmered faintly in the daylight, reflecting hues of silver and pink. She looked fragile under the sun, but strangely radiant, like she belonged to another world entirely. Too bright, she murmured, covering her eyes with her hand. Ethan smiled faintly. Welcome to the surface. They had climbed through an old maintenance shaft that led to the edge of a ruined desert town, long abandoned after the wars. Broken towers leaned like skeletons, half buried in the golden sand. The air shimmered with heat, and distant winds howled through the empty streets. Ethan checked his pack. He had water, a small pulse pistol, and an old map stored on his wrist pad. The closest fusion core depot is about 50 kilometers east, he said. We can reach it by night if we keep moving. Colin nodded silently, but her steps were slow. The surface gravity and air seemed to drain her strength. You okay? Ethan asked, concerned. She gave a small nod. The light makes me weak, but I try. He adjusted the strap on his pack. We'll rest often. Just tell me when you need to stop. As they walked through the ruins, Ethan couldn't help glancing at her. Her movements were graceful even when tired, her eyes curious as she looked at old human signs and machines half buried in sand. She stopped beside a rusted playground, touching the swing chain softly. What is this? She asked. Ethan smiled sadly. A place where human children used to play. Children? He nodded. Young ones. Like your people's small ones, maybe. Colin looked around, then whispered, No children in sanctuary. Only few left. The words hung heavy between them. He could hear the sadness in her voice, the loneliness. After hours of walking, the desert wind grew harsher. Clouds of sand rose, covering the sun. Ethan wrapped his scarf around Colin's face to protect her from the dust. She looked at him with wide eyes. You help me, always. He chuckled softly. That's what friends do. She tilted her head slightly. Friends, she repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. Before he could reply, a low rumbling echoed through the air. Ethan turned quickly, scanning the horizon. A black shape moved across the dunes, fast and mechanical. Drones, he whispered. Old patrol units. Probably still scanning for movement. Colin's eyes widened. They kill. Sometimes, Ethan said grimly. Stay low. They crouched behind a broken wall as the drone passed overhead, its red sensors sweeping the sand. For a moment, the light paused near their hiding spot. Ethan held his breath. Colin pressed close, trembling slightly. Then silence. The drone turned and disappeared over the ridge. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was close. Colin looked at him, her expression a mix of fear and wonder. You brave. He shook his head. Just lucky. They continued eastward as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange and gold. The ruins gave way to open dunes and strange stone formations that looked like the bones of ancient giants. By dusk, they reached an old highway buried in sand. Ethan found a half-collapsed tunnel entrance, once part of a transport route. We'll rest here for the night, he said. Inside, it was cool and quiet. Ethan started a small fire with his portable burner. Colin sat close, watching the flames dance. The glow reflected in her eyes, making them look like liquid amethyst. She reached out a hand. It is beautiful, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Fire. It kept humans alive for thousands of years. Colin tilted her head, thinking, Your people strong, but also destroy. He looked into the fire. Yeah, we're good at both. A long silence followed. Then Colin spoke softly. My sister, she'd dream a surface. She'd say, Someday we live together with humans. I say no, but now maybe she right. Ethan turned to her. You had a sister? Colin nodded. She died when the ship fell. She protect me. Always protect. Ethan's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Colin smiled faintly. You remind me of her. Before he could respond, a faint click echoed through the tunnel. Ethan froze. That was no natural sound. He drew his pistol quietly and signaled for Colin to stay low. A shadow moved near the tunnel's mouth, tall, slender, and shimmering faintly with silver markings. Ethan aimed. Who's there? No answer. The figure stepped closer. Colin gasped softly. It's Aaron. Who? Ethan asked. Kalen's voice trembled. Warrior from Sanctuary. He follow us. The alien stepped into the light. He wore dark armor made of crystal and bone, and his face was cold, expressionless. You should not have left, Kalen, he said in a deep, echoing voice. Ethan stood between them. She had to. The sanctuary is dying. Aaron's eyes narrowed. And you think this human can save us? He will bring ruin again. Ethan raised his weapon slightly. You'll have to get through me first. For a long moment, the tunnel filled with silence and tension. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows on the walls. Then Aaron lowered his spear slightly and said, You are brave, human, but bravery will not stop what is coming. He turned and walked back into the darkness, his form fading like smoke. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. Kalen looked terrified. He follow again, she whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. Then we'll be ready. Outside, the wind howled again, and the storm's echo. It almost sounded like distant voices calling through sand. By dawn, the storm had passed. The air was cool, and the horizon glowed with faint light. Ethan and Kalen continued east, following the cracked highway. Each step brought them closer to the old fusion depot, and closer to danger. Kalen walked beside him quietly, her hood pulled up to hide her glowing skin. The desert was silent except for the crunch of sand under their boots. Ethan kept scanning the horizon for drones, or for the warrior who had followed them the night before. Finally, as the sun climbed high, they saw it, the remains of a human research facility, half buried in dunes. Metal towers leaned at odd angles, and shattered solar panels glittered like shards of glass. The letters, Omega Reactor 7, were barely visible on a faded sign. There it is, Ethan said, shading his eyes. If we're lucky, one of the backup fusion cores will still be intact. Kalen frowned softly. This place feels wrong. He glanced at her. You can sense something? She nodded slowly. Energy here, angry. Ethan didn't understand what she meant, but he could feel it too, a strange vibration in the air, like static crawling under the skin. The place felt haunted, though by machines rather than ghosts. They entered through a cracked side door. Inside, the corridors were dim and silent, filled with dust and long-dead lights. Rusted machinery lined the walls. A flickering console near the entrance still hummed faintly with power. Ethan brushed it off and tried to access the system. Come on, just a little juice left. The screen blinked to life, showing a faded logo, Terran Federation Science Division. Then a file list appeared. Ethan's eyes narrowed. These files are classified. Kalen stood behind him, reading the words she didn't fully understand. What means subject experiment logs? He clicked one of the files. The screen showed images, alien figures in containment tubes, their bodies glowing with faint light, medical symbols, energy readings, human scientists standing beside them. Kalen's hand flew to her mouth. My people. Ethan froze. No, it can't be. The log showed dates, decades ago, long before the war had supposedly begun. Human scientists had been experimenting on Ari then captives, studying their energy cores, trying to harness their ability to generate living power. Kalen backed away from the screen, tears in her eyes. You said, humans betray. I did not want to believe. Ethan turned toward her, guilt heavy in his chest. Kalen, I didn't know. This isn't what all of us are. She looked down, voice trembling. But it was enough. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The truth was staring at them in digital ghosts. The betrayal Sarah spoke of wasn't legend. It was history. Suddenly, a deep boom echoed from somewhere above. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ethan's instincts flared. Someone's here. They ducked behind a row of consoles, just as a figure dropped through the broken roof. It was Aaron, the warrior who had followed them. His armor shimmered in the dim light, and he held a long staff that glowed with energy. You shouldn't have come, Aaron said coldly. This place is cursed. Ethan stepped forward. We're here to get the fusion core. The sanctuary is dying. Aaron's eyes flashed. The sanctuary is dying because of humans, because of this place. He struck the wall with his staff, and the console sparked. Do you see what they did to us? This is where they drained our lifeblood. Colin's voice was soft but firm. Enough, Aaron. We can end hate. We can save home. Aaron turned sharply. Save it? With him? You think a human can bring back what was lost? Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't care what happened before. I'm not them. I'm here now. I'm trying to help. For a long moment, Aaron said nothing. Then his voice softened, though his anger still burned beneath it. You cannot change what your kind is. Colin stepped closer. He already has. Her voice shook, but her eyes were strong. For a moment, Aaron hesitated. Then he looked away. Take the core and go. But if you bring another human to our gates, I will end you both. He vanished into the light above, leaving behind the faint echo of his words. Ethan exhaled shakily and turned to Colin. We'd better move fast. They descended deeper into the facility. At last, in a large chamber filled with glowing machinery, they found it, a small, cylindrical device still pulsing faintly with blue energy. That's it, Ethan whispered. He gently lifted it from its slot and sealed it in his pack. Colin touched the air above it, her eyes glowing faintly. It still lives. But as they turned to leave, alarms blared suddenly through the corridors. The base lights flickered red. Ethan cursed. Security systems are still active. A metallic voice echoed. Intruder detected, deploying automated defense. Panels open in the walls. Small drones emerging with whirring engines and flashing sensors. Energy blasts struck the ground near them. Run. Ethan shouted. They sprinted down the hall as blasts exploded around them. Colin stumbled once, but Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. The exit was only meters away. They burst outside into the blinding sunlight, sand swirling around them. Behind them, the facility began to shake, a low rumble building deep below. Colin gasped, turning to see the towers collapsing one by one. Ethan grabbed her hand. Don't look back. They ran until the ground stopped trembling. When they finally stopped, Colin fell to her knees, breathing hard. Ethan knelt beside her, checking the core, still glowing inside his pack. We did it, he said softly. Colin looked at him, eyes shining. You save us. He shook his head. No, we save each other. For the first time, she smiled through her tears, and the world around them seemed almost peaceful again. But far behind them, in the ruins of the facility, a single drone flickered back to life, transmitting a signal toward the human colonies. The sun was setting when Ethan and Colin reached the canyon again. The walls of the cliffs glowed orange, and the wind whispered like a warning through the stones. They had been walking for hours in silence, both exhausted, both afraid. Ethan looked down at the pack on his back, the fusion core still pulsing faintly inside. That small cylinder of light was the only thing that could save Colin's people. But he knew the truth now. Humans had caused their suffering. His people, his world. As they neared the secret passage, Colin stopped suddenly. Her eyes were wide, her skin glowing faintly. What is it? Ethan asked. She pointed toward the canyon entrance. Smoke, black and thick, rising from the cliffs. Ethan's heart sank. No. They ran. The tunnels that had once glowed with soft blue light were now dark, filled with dust and the smell of burning crystal. When they reached the main hall, they saw the chaos, broken pillars, fallen walls, and frightened alien women running for cover. The sanctuary was under attack. Ethan turned sharply as a deep rumble shook the chamber. From above, a human gunship roared past the canyon opening, firing beams of plasma into ground. The explosion sent waves of heat through the tunnels. Colin covered her ears, trembling. Humans found us. Ethan clenched his fists. The signal from the facility, it must have alerted them. He saw Saris then, Colin's mother, standing tall amidst the smoke, her silver hair burning in the orange light. Ethan, she called, you brought the core? He nodded, pulling it from his pack. Yes, but we need to move now. They'll destroy this place. Saris reached for the core, but before she could take it, a plasma blast struck the wall beside her. The shock wave threw them all to the ground. Colin screamed, Mother! Sarah struggled to her feet, clutching her side. Go. Take her to the heart chamber. Ethan grabbed Colin's arm. Come on. They ran through collapsing tunnels, dodging falling debris. The air shimmered with heat, and the walls glowed faintly red as power systems overloaded. Ethan could feel the ground shaking beneath his boots. When they reached the heart chamber, a vast crystal cavern filled with glowing spires, Colin fell to her knees. The great crystal at the center, once shining bright, now flickered weakly. It's dying, she whispered. Ethan took the fusion core and connected it to the old interface. This should jumpstart it. Colin stood beside him, her hands trembling. If it fails, I'll die. He looked at her, breathing hard. Then it can't fail. He pressed the final switch. The fusion core hummed, glowing brighter. Then a wave of light surged through the entire chamber. The crystal pulsed once, then again, faster, stronger. Colin gasped, eyes wide. It lives! But before they could celebrate, a shadow appeared at the chamber entrance. Aaron, the warrior, his armor scorched and his face torn. Behind him, faint blue flames from the bombardment burned the tunnels. Ethan raised his pistol. Aaron, it's working. We can save everyone. Aaron's voice was harsh. Save? You brought death here, human. Your people will never stop. He aimed his energy spear at Ethan. Colin stepped between them, tears streaming down her face. No more killing. Please. Aaron hesitated, trembling with fury. You don't understand. They'll come again. They'll never let us live. Ethan lowered his gun slowly. Then I'll stop them. Aaron stared confused. How? Ethan looked at the glowing reactor. If I overload this core, it'll wipe out every signal within 100 kilometers. The humans won't be able to find this place again. But he glanced at Colin. Someone has to stay to trigger it. Colin shook her head instantly. No, you can't. He smiled softly. You once said your sister protected you. Let me do the same. Tears fell down her cheeks. Ethan, he reached out and touched her face gently. You saved me too, Colin. You showed me that humanity isn't about blood. It's about choice. Saris limped into the chamber then, wounded but standing tall. She looked at them both and understood instantly. You would sacrifice yourself? She asked quietly. Ethan nodded. If it means saving her and all of you. Saris closed her eyes, sorrow and pride mixing in her voice. Then you are more human than those who hunt us. Colin fell to her knees, gripping his arm. Please come with us. Please. Ethan smiled sadly. Go, Colin. You have a world to rebuild. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. For a moment, their minds touched, a faint pulse of light between them. She whispered, I will remember. Then Saris pulled her away as the ground began to shake violently. Ethan ran to the control console, setting the overload sequence. 10 seconds, the system announced. He looked one last time toward the tunnel, where Colin disappeared. Then he smiled, whispering to the empty chamber. You were the light all along. A blinding flash consumed the sanctuary, a wave of white and blue energy rising like a storm into the sky. The canyon glowed for miles, and then silence. When the dust finally cleared, there was nothing left but stillness. The human ships above, blinded and damaged by the pulse, retreated, unable to find what they had destroyed. Far from the ruins, in the shadow of a rocky ridge, Colin stood with her mother and the survivors. She looked toward the horizon where the light had vanished. In her hand, a small crystal pendant flickered once, a faint echo of Ethan's heartbeat. Saris placed a hand on her shoulder. He saved us. Colin nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. No, Mother, he saved everyone. The wind carried her words into the golden sky, and somewhere beyond the clouds, the stars shimmered brighter, as if one of them had just found its place among them.